Welcome to the Sean Trey Show. Today I've got an awesome guest with me. Now, would you like to introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do?
Well, my name is Phil Madeira. My close friends call me Philip. I'm 69 years old, and for the last 12 years, my most public gig has probably been playing keyboard and accordion and guitar for a singer named Emmylou Harris.
Nice.
Who is iconic in the folk Americana world, but I've also probably made my major living as a songwriter.
Yeah.
Until the bottom dropped out of that, you can get your songs for free now. So I just, I'm just thrilled that I have yet to have a day job. I've pretty much worked on my own terms since about 1976. So that's a pretty good run.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Let's dive in. Ooh, I've got so much to unpack in that. That's awesome. There's just so much there.
Let's go.
So working on your own terms, what was it about that when you started getting into this profession? What was it that you said, hey, you know what? I want this to be on my own terms. How did that come about for you?
Well, now I don't know if I've literally had it truly that way, okay? But the deal is that when I was in college, and in America, what we grow up with an expectation. We want our child to go to college. And, so I went to college. I went to a small religious school in Indiana. And I made a lot of great friends. And I did music there, but I'm not a skilled person in terms of I'm not a great sight reader. If you take music theory at a small college with a small music department, it's going to be choral theory. It's not going to relate to pop music or rock, or certainly not blues. And so I was an art major because I'm a pretty good painter, and
it's awesome.
But I wound up meeting someone when I was in college. I went to a concert that I didn't want to go to, and not only did I not plan on going to the concert, neither did I plan on going to the sound check, but my friend was my college buddy, who actually died about 2 years ago. He was so obsessed with seeing this contemporary Christian musician play. He was a guitar player. I don't know how many of the people watching would know his name, but his name is Phil Madeira, and he was an excellent guitar player. And we met that evening, and he said, I think we're going to be in a band together someday. And sure enough, that door opened, and I actually finished my degree via correspondence course on the road, in 1977 or so with this gentleman. And that was my first real lesson that everything is about connection. Everything is about... You and I don't even know, Sean, beyond the fact that we are doing each other a service right now.
Yeah.
We're helping each other out. And I'm grateful, by the way, to be on your show. You need guests on your show. So, it's always one hand scratching another or whatever. But it's all about connections. And so I look back at that very first connection via a friend who knew this guitar player. And there's no such thing as a self-made person.
100%. 100%. And I think that's one of the things that we so often forget. And I don't know why. There is, in a lot of circles, artistic circles, people kind of have this look down on networking as like, oh, that's what those people do, man. Like, that's what those social climbers do. It's like, no. Networking doesn't have to be something where you walk into a room and be like, what can you do for me? It can be like, it can be just two people that for a time come together for a conversation and just talk. It can be, I look at it this way, right? we have, like you said, everyone's providing the other person with a service.
Right.
You know, and there are different services that we're offering. Like right here, one of the reasons you had asked me before we started, how did I find you? And I had looked on, you were tagged, I think, on either under singer-songwriter, or there was a couple different, it was like, and there was this bio on you, and I read up, and I was like, that's awesome, man. And then I went to your, and I went to your page, and all of that was awesome. But the thing that really sold me and made it so that I wanted to talk to you was this. I scrolled down through your, you know, your accolades, which people watching, check out your resume. It's awesome. And but I got to the bottom of your page, and at the bottom of your page was this mentorship part where you were talking about how one of the things that you liked to do was to mentor people. And I got to tell you this one story. When I was starting to come up in my creative career, I was working as an actor in LA. And I was like one of many of those people that had absolutely no idea what in the heck they were doing. And I remember being on the set of my first major movie, and people are looking at you like, yeah, come on, what are you doing, man? You're doing it wrong. Pick it up. Let's go. And just like, and I'm just sitting there going, I am way in over my element. Like I am way out of my element right now.
Right.
And I remember we sat down, and there was this really cool actor named Armin Mueller-Stahl. He's an older guy now. And he was older at that time as well. And he's been in a ton of movies. A German actor, I believe, and just the nicest guy. And we were filming, and you know, in between takes, I'm sitting there, and he's this really accomplished person, and he looks down at me, and without me saying anything, he just starts up a conversation, and he's like, tell me about your career. Who are you represented by? Who's your manager? How much work are you getting? How often are you going out? And he just starts asking all these questions and then giving me this advice. And I didn't ask for it. And then every day that I saw him, he just started, you know, picking my brain and talking to me and telling me. And I was like, I don't know what I did that I maybe he saw something in me and, you know, of himself and me. I don't know. But it was such a powerful thing to have someone just sit there and ask, how can I be of service to you? And that's kind of what I'm getting back to, is that this networking it's not networking. It's not just, if you can come at it from a place of like, how can we all help each other? How can we be of service to another person in some way? You build something even more powerful. Does that make any sense at all? Oh,
well, not only does it make sense, but I think, you know, if I'm operating at a high level of, you know, function, when I encounter a person, you know, I try to operate under an ethic, and this is not, I probably don't even hit this 25% of the time, but my, you know, at my best version of me, what I try to do when I encounter a person is, you know, especially like especially like if I'm working with a recording artist, or actually when I go and I play a solo gig, or, you know, I actually, a lot of times I'll work with a trio, but a lot of times I'll go in, and so my mindset when I go in as a performer is, okay, what does this room full of people need from me? I already know what I need from them. I need them to listen. I need them to pay for a ticket. I need them to buy merch. I already know all that stuff. But if I can kind of remove what I need from the equation, what I have found is when I go in, or even, you know, even in this situation right here, you and I don't know each other. We've just met. And to me, media is always good. You know, it's just, you know, I'm always grateful. So whether it's something like this, or whether it's, you know, I mean, my publicist has gotten me in Rolling Stone a couple of times. You know, nobody knows who I am, but it's good, you know. So this works. It's going to work for me. But what I try to do is really on an individual level. And I need to learn to make sure I connect this not just with potential business but with potential relationship. Even with someone that I'm like, okay, I'm encountering a person that I really don't want to encounter in this moment.
Yeah, right.
But if I have any sort of spiritual belief, if I have any idea that maybe a greater hand is at work, am I willing to say, all right, fill me with whatever I need to give this person right now, because they might need to hear my story. They just might need me to hear their story, and so just that willingness to, in a moment, give someone what they need. And a lot of times, the performance aspect is easy. Can I just play a great show and make everybody happy that they came? And I've actually learned for years when I was on stage as a sideman, or even as just my own self. But I've spent many years in the service of other artists, of mostly with Emmylou Harris, but I've played for just a lot of great people. But I moved to Nashville to be a solo artist. That was my goal. I just wanted to be a solo artist. The doors opened for me to be a songwriter for many other artists: Garth Brooks, Alison Krauss, Keb Mo, Amy Grant, which is wonderful. And so at this late stage in life, like for the last decade, I've really devoted myself to making my own records.
That's awesome.
But the thing is that, we don't always, so we go in in my case, I went in with the goal of being a solo artist. And what happened was I had to learn to serve others, and that's been a great blessing for me. So I just think always going in and in a mentor way, and I just did a songwriting workshop. So I just did a thing, my Mercyland Songwriter Workshop, and one of those people said, "Hey, I saw on your website that you mentor. What does that look like?" And I said, "Well, you tell me what you want it to look like, and we'll go from there." So having that mindset of just saying, what can I give a person, and I think it's a good place for your heart to be, and because what I have learned, it's so funny. And tell me if I'm talking too much, by the way.
No, this is awesome.
Okay. So
dropping wisdom right now. It's raining wisdom.
Okay. Well, so it's interesting because I have been working on a thing lately with a person from out of town who hired myself and then a couple of I brought bass, I brought drums, I brought guitar into a setting for this songwriter, and so he got his PR machine working. And one of the things in the article that his local paper had written was something to the effect of that when he invited us to be part of his band. Well, we're not part of his band. We're session musicians serving this guy, right? But he said, so his quote was, when I asked them if they would be in my band, they said, "Oh, we were going to ask you if we could be in your band." And I actually wrote him a letter and I said, this is not good for my business. I do not ever ask anyone, "Can I be in your band?" Now I might go to a friend and say, "Shall we start something?" But I did not wind up playing with Emmylou Harris because I brazenly said, "Can I be in your band?" I knew her for many years. Yeah. I was a gentleman around her. I was quiet around her. I never knew this would come my way. And when it did come my way, it brought many blessings, because that association in the field that I work mainly in, I do a lot of jazz and blues stuff, but I'm mainly known in Americana music. And working with her, it's like being in soul music and working with Aretha or something. So anyway, I responded to this guy. I said, "Hey, I do not need this. First of all, it's a misquote. None of us asked you to be in your band. You're paying us. We are happy to take your money, and we're happy to give you the best we can give you. but it was a real. I just cringed when I saw this because I don't want to be identified as a person that's coming to you, Sean, and saying, Sean, what can you do for me? I want to, if you want something from me, we'll have a discussion, and I'm completely approachable. And anyway, I don't know if I'm making any sense here or not. But
I think that what I'm hearing from you is that, there's a couple things that you're coming from. Like, in some type of first of all, I think there was a book I was reading, and it was a big thing on this book, and this is something my wife taught me. You have to be careful with your speech, because my wife has been playing in the U.S. music industry is a delicate thing, because there's and relationships are very delicate. You come to Asia, and the complexity of relationships is tenfold more complicated, because there's so many more nuances. And we Americans, me and so many of the Americans that come here, we fail with knowing how to handle some of those nuances. And my wife is always working with me on, in Asia, there's this concept of face, and like, you have to be very careful about how you present face. And you have to be careful about how you say things, and you're mindful. And what it allowed me to say is I became more mindful of what I was saying, more mindful about how I was representing things and how I was representing myself. And I'm the type where when I approach something, when I look at something, I recently wrote a song with my friend Nico, and Nico, he just did the beat, and he just did this. And he's like, Sean, you don't have to give me credit. Just, you just put it out there. And I was like, Nico, you are the joint writer. You are listed on every single thing. Like, you made this song with me. It is not mine. You have to give people credit where credit is due.
Oh, yeah.
I remember working in a movie once, and the credits ran. I worked my ass off on that movie. And then the movie finished. My name wasn't up there. And I got left out of the credits. And it was a big picture. It was a big production. I was there the whole time. And it was just like... And I could have gotten angry. I didn't get angry. I got hungry. I got motivated by that, because that's how I roll. I'm always the type where, I just like, what? I've got to make myself even more indispensable so that will never happen again, And because... but I think that there's something to be said for, this reciprocal nature of things. Like, and you can't misrepresent that. And you also have to be careful, because there are people in the industry, in the creative industries, who will treat people like a bottle of Coke, Yeah. And so you have to be careful of the being drained. And I think
it's funny you mentioned credit, because obviously these things that we do, whether it's whatever media, and I suppose it's just across the board in any industry, but particularly,
especially music,
name recognition is really important, and credit's important. And it's funny because as a writer, I remember I had a publishing deal years ago, and, the way average publishing deal works is that let's say you have a deal where you've got to write 100% of 12 songs in a year. And so if you co-write everything at 50%, well, now you have to write 24 songs in a year, however you want to look it up. And some people do splits. I've seen people count words. And the people who count words, they're greedy. The people who, I had one person, her manager, who was also her husband, reached out to my administrator and said, hey, so on this song, you have, it was literally like, 42.3%. And I just told my gal Friday, that probably sounds horrible to say, but I just said, call them back. Say, Philip never does anything other than equal split. If I carry the load, I'm not going to diminish and you did less. I'm not going to diminish the fact that you were in the room. Something about your presence helped that thing happen. So don't do that to me. Well, it's really funny. So when I had this deal, I had written with a guy who's semi-famous Christian artist, and he had called me. He said, he said, I need the song doctor. He said, I'm almost done, but I can't get this song finished. I'll give you 50%, which I would have said, well, you have to anyway, for me to get involved. It's just a principle I work with. And we wound up, and this song went number one in one of the, I don't know if it was the main Christian, I don't really pay attention to a whole lot of formats, but this song did well. But I wasn't seeing a whole lot reflected financially or otherwise. So I went, when I finally had to settle up and count through all the percentages, I called my publisher. I just said, okay, send me my list so I know that I've fulfilled. And this guy who was supposed to give me 50% had given me he had turned it in with my publisher. His managers had called my publisher, and said, Phil's in for 5%. And that was essentially criminal. It was, I don't know how many thousands of dollars I lost, but I try to err in the other direction. Now, I will say I won't work with that guy again. I have no interest, although somebody just did a tribute album for this guy, and I was begged to play accordion on one track, and I relented. And it's not that I don't want to have hate for anybody, but I also want to be wise. Will I work with someone who has burned me? Maybe. Will I work with them if they've burned me twice? No, life's too short. I don't want that stuff out there. But I will say that, like over the last year, the woman I'm involved with, who is just a peach and talented beyond. Actually, she's a fairly famous actress here, but she's also an amazing singer, and she's a writer, but she doesn't know it yet. And so we've co-written 2 songs. And then she was at my workshop this week. She co-wrote a few with some other folks. And it's so funny. She will always say, and she's one of these people who calls me Philip, by the way, but she'll say, and I only tell you that because I'm going to quote her, but she's like, I helped Philip write this. And I'm like, and I correct her. I said, no, we co-wrote this song. You brought me an idea. You brought me fleshed out lyrics. Stop saying you helped me and start owning what you've done, and by the same token, you don't want to really polish the image of someone who's done nothing, so I don't, anyway, credit's really important to me. Giving credit is equally important.
Yeah. So. Well, and I think that's, life is about this reciprocality, and you have to understand that so many people early on in their career will try to get ahead by giving. And they don't realize that there are people who profit on taking. And you have to be ready and prepared to kind of
you have to be wise.
You have to be wise.
Yeah.
Now, where did you start with music? How did you get started in music?
Well, I started as a drummer when I was a kid, and I don't know if you can see, there's a couple of drums.
I do see the drums
back here.
You, yeah.
I collect old vintage drums, and
nice.
Just a thing. But I started as a drummer, and then, but my mom was a church organist, and so she was trying to teach me piano. I hated it, but I loved playing. I just hated the lessons, and eventually I became one of these guys that can kind of play everything, and jack of all trades, master of none. But I became when I bought a Hammond organ in the late 80s, that really changed my world. And so I became in Nashville, I became one of those guys, call him for B3. And then as a songwriter, really, that was the first success I had in Nashville, was as a songwriter. And so I moved here having played with this gentleman, Phil Phil Kagi that I mentioned meeting in college.
Yeah.
I had played with him for a couple of years, and he had a high profile in the Christian music thing. I don't think I really don't know what he's doing now. Some of your relationships, some of the very people that brought you to the party, you can fall out of touch with, or even
life happens.
Yeah, life happens. It's kind of like just the way it is. But anyhow, because of that association, I was able to have some doors open for me. The minute I would say, at least with my Christian connections here in town, it was like, oh, you played with him, come on over, and
Right.
so I that was my parlance for a while. But I really, even though I actually am a person of faith, although I always clarify that I'm inclusive. I just, in this day and age when religion is so divisive, I want people to know I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm not proselytizing. But I do have something I believe, which most of us have something we believe, even if we believe in nothing, And
Right.
but at some point, despite this great success I had as a writer and as a session player in the Christian world, my concept of God was such that I really thought, God must get sick of hearing songs about God. It's like, can we write about love? Can we write about sex? Can we write about cars? And the doors opened for me in what is now called the Americana world, which is names like, so I've played with a lot of people in that world: Steve Earle and Emmylou Harris, Buddy Miller, Rodney Crowell, Old Crow, Keb Mo. So it's kind of like, as doors opened, sometimes doors shut, and that's the best thing that can happen to you is no. One of my friends, and you might know this term, one of my friends who's a filmmaker, he's always talking about the worst thing is a Hollywood maybe. He said it's better to get a no than maybe.
Yeah.
And so clarity for me was certain doors shutting and then other doors opening, and then the willingness to say, you know what? I have an idea. I'm going to figure out how to produce an idea. So I wound up doing a record called Mercyland, Hymns for the Rest of Us, around the time when President Obama was running for office. I had the idea because I just saw this ugly side of religion that didn't know what to do with a African American candidate, and I thought, well, this isn't me. This isn't how I feel, and so I felt like doing a kind of a record of faith, but with most of the artists on it they were probably ambiguous about these things. Yeah. And but I invited everybody from Emmylou to, well, actually a group called the Civil Wars. We wound up getting a Grammy for a song called From This Valley, which was the first song on that record. And then I invited, I have a friend named John Schofield who is a major guitar player in the jazz scene. I just love his playing, so I just invited him. And I realized, I can make my own rules. I can make my own music. I can cross genres.
Right?
I can do what but it's all up to me. It's up to me to ask people. Yeah. It's up to me to present people with a worthy idea. And of course, labels now are worthless. I mean, a record label is. Right. So I'm in control of a very small world. I don't make a fortune, but I have
control.
I have control, and I live, from my perspective, as a guy who grew up with not a lot, although I grew up with a lot of love. I had fabulous parents, but
that's awesome. I
feel like I live a lavish life, even though I'm sitting here in a 1,000 square foot condominium. I don't miss the 4,000 square foot McMansion. Right now, what I really have to maintain is the art. I own a little house. I mean, a little place here, and it takes very little of my time to worry about property. And then I get to focus on the intellectual property, which is what I'm all about. It's what you're all about.
Right. Well, and I think that you hit on a couple of things there. But one of the things that I love, and you said this earlier, and this is something that really inspired me. I remember when I'm 42, and I went to my guidance counselor when I was 22, 21, finishing university. And I sat there and I said, I want to be a singer-songwriter. I remember it. And I remember my guidance counselor looking at me going, you're so good at all these other things. You should be pre-med. You really need to go to med school.
Oh.
And I spent years in medical school. I finally dropped out of medical school. Then I got into film and I did lots of other things. And last year was the first time I wrote my own song. My first song.
Good for you.
And I felt so inspired. And it's a song I love. And it was a song that I wrote for my wife called These Two Hands. And it was a song that I wrote for her and my daughter about building this world. These two hands, I'll give you a home. I'll build you a castle made of stone. I'll build it up with my blood and my bone. And like that was some of the lyrics. And the idea being, it's not a perfect song. It's not a great song. But it's my song.
Yeah.
It's my song. I wrote that and I loved it. You know what I mean? And the idea of being able to make something that I love and I like and that has my gravitas, my soul in it, is powerful to people. And I love that you were saying is like your original ambition coming to Nashville was to be, a solo act. And then now that you're doing it, man, I love that. Yeah. I love it.
Well, it's never, until they're planting you, it's never too late. And I, it was interesting this week. I was in North Carolina doing my Mercyland songwriter workshop, and I had I always have two professional songwriters with me. So this time I had a person named Cindy Morgan, who's like unreal great, and then a guy named Steve Hindalong. And so we're kind of the guides. Everybody gets to write with a pro at least once during the 3 full days. But one of the guys there was 80 years old. And I just thought, awesome. And of course, even though I'm 69 and I'm not that far from 80, if I really want to think about it, I'm still not really wrapping my head around the idea of 80 years old. But so here's a guy, who is trying to write songs. And my daughter said to me when she turned 21, Dad, I haven't done anything with my life. And I said, at the time she turned 21, I would have been, I don't know, 50 maybe. And I just said, well, I said, I have felt the same way. I said, right now I'm in my prime. Well, now she's 31 and I'm really, I'm making the best music I've ever made right now. Now you look at a band like the Beatles, had they all lived, had they continued playing together,
right?
I think they had their heyday when they had their heyday. I don't think they would have, I think they might have made great music, but the remarkable stuff for them happened when they were in their 20s. When I made my first record with a label, I was, 30, 31 or 32. And I don't want to hear that record. I wasn't ready to make a record. I was trying to fit into a world that was not right for me. I was trying to be a rock singer because that was kind of like, that was going to get me on the radio and stuff. And so it took me, in the 90s, I started making my own records. And those records are great. I've got 2 records from the 90s. And then in the 2000s, I waited 10 years and then I wound up releasing stuff. But it was actually 2016 when I got inspired by going home to Providence, Rhode Island, and I realized I need to write a record about this. And I just wrote an entire record, which is how I've worked ever since. I kind of get a concept now, and I'll go with it. And that was the first time, apart from my Mercyland thing, that was the first time when Rolling Stone was like, hey, this is Emmylou Harris's keyboard guy. They erroneously called me her band leader. She's her own band leader. But that mistake probably didn't hurt me, but it just was like, I'm not the band leader. All this to say, look, pay attention to your dreams. Pay attention to your dreams. They might seem outlandish, but those dreams may come. There's one of two places those dreams are coming from. One is that they really are inspired, that they're really deep within yourself. And the other is that you are deluded and you have hubris that so I don't want to say that every dream is inspired, but sometimes that's all you've got, and so I just, my mantra is yes. I say yes most of the time to creative opportunities. I produce a lot of artists that you've never heard of, because to me it's like, well, just as I'm trying to fulfill a dream, I've got to be gracious to that person. If I can help you get to your dream without it, without it costing me blood, I'll do it.
As long as it goes back to our thing, as long as there's a reciprocal relationship. I love that you keep coming back to the word reciprocity, because I was married for 25 years. I'm great friends with my ex-wife. And then after that, I had a 10-year relationship with someone who passed away. But there was always, I never had true reciprocity until recently. I'm in my late 60s and finally am experiencing that in an intimate relationship. And so whether it's your marriage or business relationship or friendship, if you don't have reciprocity, you probably don't have longevity. And if you do have longevity, it's going to be an imbalance, not healthy, So I love that you said that. And I think that that's something that people forget. And I don't know whether it's because there's a lack of self-worth. There is a lack of understanding of the nature of reciprocity. But I think that it's something people have to learn, and they have to understand their own value. And I think that's one of the areas that people don't give themselves credit, is that there's not always an understanding of their value. But I want to come back to one thing that you pointed at, the idea of saying yes. And I had this great tonight, and I have my deep spiritual beliefs as well. And I'm not super religious, but I'm deeply spiritual about the way things go. And like tonight, my wife and I were about ready to, we decided to go out. We wanted to get out, take my daughter out, because we were exiting a long lockdown, 6+ months of like strict lockdown, people locked in their houses. It was horrible. And so we're just like thankful to be able to go out. And we were driving down the street, and we were about ready. I was looking for this one place. I said, let's go out, get my daughter some food out, and stop and get something fun. So I was trying to look up this location. My phone turned off. I didn't hit any buttons, but my phone turned off. And then my wife starts looking up the location, and her phone wasn't working right. And she says, maybe we shouldn't go there. And I was like, all right, man, I'm gonna follow just the way things go. And she's like, how about we go to this building, this Bitexco? Our daughter saw it last week. She wanted to go to the Sky Tower. It's the second tallest building in the country. Used to be the tallest, and they have this beautiful like viewing area that you can kind of look at the whole city. And I've never been up there. And there's a place you could eat next door. So I was like, sure, we'll think about it. I don't know. Maybe it's going to be too busy. It's a Saturday night. I'm not sure. And we're driving. And I said, I don't know. I'll find some place for us to go. We're driving. And we're on the motorcycle, and suddenly this lady pulls up to us. We're halfway to like downtown, and this lady pulls up next to us. Do you know where this tower is? Do you know how to get there? And I looked at my wife, and I looked at her, and I was like, just follow us. That's where we're heading. And, you know, and she kind of followed us because, you know, it's a motorcycle city, and people, you can talk to them.
Right.
But my point is, like, I wasn't ready to say yes. I wasn't ready to do. And you talked about how some of your music career started with this concert you didn't want to go to. But if you're willing to say yes to things, and it was the perfect evening, it was the perfect night. There was nothing wild, or there was no amazing revelations, but it was a beautiful place. And I've never been up in that tower before. And it was such a beautiful, powerful evening with my family. It was really wonderful. And I wasn't ready to say yes. But when I did, such a good, fulfilling thing kind of came out of it. And I think that that was a big life lesson for me tonight.
Yeah.
Got to be ready to say yes, man.
I think so. And, you know, obviously there are times to say no.
To have your boundaries and say no, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, boundaries are everything. And just, you know, I mean, one of my things, in fact, just before you and I got on, I was on a hike with one of my great friends of many years, and we were just talking about, you know, our friendship. There are times when you have to draw boundaries. It might be a family member. It might be a friend where you realize, I don't really. I mean, I'm kind of long suffering. I will take a lot of. I will. You can antagonize me for a while. It might be years, but at some point, I reach the end of
enough's enough
of grace, you know, and I have, and so it's like, and that's another thing is just. So I will say, yeah, my mantra has been yes, but there are also times when you just say, I'm not going to work with that person again. And you know, I work for myself. So every person, you know, it's like there's one guy I won't work with, and it's working with him is $1,200 a day, which is good money here. I won't do it. You know, it's like I am comfortable enough to say my dignity is more important and my mental health is more important than to work with this highly dysfunctional, destructive person. You know, so I mean, there's a lot of borderline personalities in our business, and I've just learned trust that drawing lines. Yep. You know, it might hurt you in the short run. It's not going to hurt you in the long run. You know,
no.
Being wise.
I think that's powerful advice. Now, if you could go back in time to a younger version of yourself, what advice would you give your younger self? Not changing things, but what advice would you give yourself? I don't really know. I mean, I guess I you know, it's kind of like, in my case, I had to, whatever lessons I've learned, you know, I wish I had learned them sooner. I just don't have any regrets. So it's like hard to know, but, well, I guess, you know, I probably the same advice that, I mean, I did pay attention to my dreams, you know, so, but that's kind of my advice. Pay attention to your dreams. And, maybe, you know, there's a personality system called the Enneagram. I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram. My friend always talks about this. I'm not so familiar. My friend always talks about it, so I need to look it up after tonight.
It's ENNEA, Enneagram, and it's fascinating. It's a personality system, and and it's an ancient system, by the way. It's been around for a long time. But I think I would have said maybe, hey, because somebody approached me with that I'm running on 10% now. So anyway, but somebody approached me years ago, actually the guy I hiked with today, like probably 20 years ago, he was talking about the Enneagram, and I hated being typecast. I want to be an individual, so I don't want to be. I don't want someone saying you're a 7, But now that I've actually looked at, I wish I had paid attention to that sort of stuff, because I would have known then. Here's how you, Philip, react. This is how you react when you are surprised by something that's not great. Here's your typical reaction is, maybe an overreaction, and so just some wisdom like that. I kind of wish I had known a little more about myself, like just kind of doing the work. I remember taking the Myers-Briggs test, and it did not make sense to me. But I think just, doing some personal work, I had to go through some pretty painful stuff, I think, that forced me to do some personal work. And thankfully, I guess I've been through some things that you might look at me and say, wow, this guy is long suffering. I've never thought of myself as that way. I have embraced it and been grateful for. Listen, the music does not come from the good times. The music really comes from the painful things. And I reminded my students this past week at Mercyland, look, you're having a great time, but this material in general, I believe, comes from grief and the human condition, whether we know it or not. We are in a state of at least subconscious grief, because we know we're going to lose each other. We know we're going to die. And so I think just being in touch with that sort of reality and embracing and accepting, and actually, I think the people who know me best would tell you that I'm exceedingly grateful. In the worst of circumstances, I actually have been able to be grateful for the very thing that I should be cursing. I'm grateful for it, because I believe I'm being taught something. I also know, just from a selfish standpoint, it's going to contribute to the music,
Right.
And
for sure, man.
Yeah.
That's some deep wisdom there. Well, brother, I wanted to say this has been a masterclass in life and thought.